Greg Berhalter has released a 25-man roster ahead of the November qualifiers and the all-important game against Mexico coming up in just a few days. And for a roster that we did not think would have many surprises, Greg managed to smash in some surprises on us here. The big one, the big headline right off the top, John Brooks, the center back that one of the few players in this team that has World Cup experience, the guy who's been playing year in and year out in the Bundesliga, has been dropped from this roster, at least according to a tweet from Doug McIntyre. It appears that John Brooks is healthy and is just a healthy scratch, and Greg decided to leave him off of this roster. Absolutely wild news. If you would have heard that, 6 months ago, that John Brooks would be dropped ahead of a World Cup qualifier, a home World Cup qualifier against Mexico, incredibly surprising. Other than that, Serginho Dest was a wild surprise. We all thought, coming off of that game against Costa Rica, that Serginho Dest was just sort of rounding into form for the U.S. men's national team. He picked up an injury, and we thought it was just a small injury and it wouldn't affect the World Cup qualifying window. Well, he's been left off, and there's been some surprises in store because of that. Luca De La Torre, the guy who just cannot seem to get in Greg Berhalter's good graces, he has also been left off. And last but not least, at the striker position, we all wondered who that second striker would be. I tossed around some names like Jordan Pefog, Josh Sargent, Daryl DK, and it was in fact Jesus Ferreira, a guy who I thought might be a winger option for us, is at striker. So there are a lot of players who did make the roster, and it is still a very strong roster and capable of producing a very strong 11. Let's get into that right now in this episode of the Yank Report. What's up? My name's Sam. This is the Yank Report. We talk about the U.S. men's national team. If you're a fan of the national team, hit that subscribe button. If you want to support the channel, hit like. You can become a member, get access to behind the scenes stuff, get badges, all kinds of good stuff. Let's start with the goalkeepers. And, coming into this window, we said Ethan Horvath was in a position where his call-up was kind of in doubt because he hasn't been getting minutes for his club, and whenever he has gotten minutes, they have not been very good minutes, so he has been left off as well. So we have Zach Steffen, Matt Turner, and Sean Johnson. Now, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the third goalkeeper because it's probably not going to be relevant to this window with only 2 games. And boy, if the third goalkeeper is relevant, we're in problems. But the top 2 keepers, Zach Steffen and Matt Turner, there's been a lot of questions about who's going to start between Steffen and Turner. A lot of folks out there think that Zach Steffen should get the start against Mexico and should be the number 1 keeper because of his distribution ability. Now, I do wonder, with John Brooks out, John Brooks is, I think, far and away the best distributing center back that we have on this team. So I wonder if no John Brooks and no Serginho Dest, I wonder if the back line is even capable of distributing and possessing the ball at an ability enough to warrant bringing Steffen in and losing Matt Turner's shot-stopping ability. So I got to assume with no Dest and no Brooks, that means that Matt Turner is going to have both games in this window. And let's move on to the center backs. We have Mark McKenzie, Chris Richards, Miles Robinson, and Walker Zimmerman. And as I mentioned in the beginning, no John Brooks is absolutely crazy. And whenever I first saw it, I wondered if there would be an injury or something like that. And I saw Doug McIntyre release this tweet with a statement from John Brooks where he said, "In life and in soccer, nothing is ever handed to you, nor should it be. The decision to leave me out of this camp isn't surprising, given some of my recent performances for the USMNT that aren't up to my standards. My job is now to work hard to be the very best I can be. I feel great about this week's Champions League performance and my recent play with Wolfsburg, and I will keep building on my performance there until I reach my goal of helping the USMNT reach the next World Cup." Wild statement from John Brooks in that, on its face, it's, he hasn't performed very well for the national team in recent games. There's been some goals that a lot of people have directly pinned on John Brooks. But at the same time, John Brooks, like he said in his statement, is a Champions League defender and has been one of the more reliable and veteran players that we've had on this national team. And to drop him after a couple of games seems crazy given what he's given to this national team over the period of his career. Not to mention, and we'll get into this later, but there are some players who made this roster who have had some pretty poor performances, have had repeatedly some pretty poor performances, and yet they still get called in. So to to have those players who are not even starters for this national team get brought in game after game whenever a guy like John Brooks, who just has such a tremendous upside, is left off, is a little wild. Now, let's take a walk into the world of speculation real quick. Okay, now this is all just opinion and inference and just things that I've seen watching the games and from talking to people who have been in the stadium. There have been numerous occasions where I've seen where things aren't going well for the national team, or maybe they are going well for the national team, and we see an image of John Brooks being fairly demonstrative on the field, either towards his teammates or towards Greg Berhalter. That's been something that's been so apparent that I've asked other people if they've seen it and if it's a thing that we should be worried about. So I wonder if some of the way that John has been carrying himself on and off the field, his body language and his attitude towards Berhalter and some of the other players, if that has impacted this decision. And if it is, okay, I think that we should be empowering coaches to make decisions like this. Now, at the same time, if it doesn't play out for them, the coach is definitely on the hook for this decision. But if you're going to apply that to one player, you got to apply that to all players, man. And to see that John Brooks gets punished in this situation and other guys continue to get rewarded with playing time is a little wild for me. Let's move on to some of the other center backs. Now, Mark McKenzie is on this list. He has not been playing well for the national team and hasn't been playing much for his club. So I'm a bit nervous about seeing him against Mexico or Jamaica. We also have Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman and Chris Richards. Now, Chris Richards has been getting minutes for his club. He's got a handful of starts and he's kind of got some bench appearances. So I wouldn't say he's an every game starter for his club at Hoffenheim, but he's definitely a contributor. I think in the last game, whenever he started against Costa Rica, it wasn't a dominant performance from Chris Richards. I think that he's capable of much more. I think that he's just a young player that's going to need some reps in order to get that confidence that he has with his club team up for the national team, and that's just going to come with time. The thing is, we don't have a lot of time right now. We got Mexico. We got the strongest other team in CONCACAF that we're playing. So will Berhalter put Chris Richards on the field against Mexico? That is going to be a very interesting thing. If it's not Chris Richards, it's probably going to be Walker Zimmerman. Walker Zimmerman has been a very reliable defender. He is quality at reading the game. He's quality in the air. Not the most athletic guy in the world, but is a pretty dependable defender. And it's good to have Walker Zimmerman in this situation with no John Brooks, with a young Chris Richards to pair next to Miles Robinson, who's been an absolute rock for the U.S. men's national team in defense. Moving on to the fullbacks, I said at the top that Serginho Dest is not going to be included in this list, which is a big shock. Heading into this game, I was really excited about seeing a back four of Anthony Robinson, John Brooks, Miles Robinson, and Serginho Dest. I thought that group has shown very well both defensively and in attack and in keeping possession, and I was excited to finally see a solidified back line for this national team that could kind of grow and learn and build something. And then we get the bombshell, no John Brooks, no Serginho Dest, so it's going to be different. We have Reggie Cannon, Anthony Robinson, Joe Scally, Sam Vines, and DeAndre Yedlin. Now, I released a video for my members yesterday talking about, what would I be upset about if once this roster would be released, what would genuinely make me disappointed? And the one thing I came back to was no Joe Scally would make me disappointed. So to see his name on the list is a good thing, and to see that especially in a window where we're not going to have Serginho Dest, to have a right back who's been starting a number of games, who's played I think Bayern Munich twice at this point, and has gotten a full season, or at least half a season in the Bundesliga under his belt is reassuring. So I hope to see Joe Scally slot in against Mexico. I think that he is fully capable of doing that. I don't really have any qualms about it being his first start, especially whenever you consider who else we could possibly start. Reggie Cannon, I believe he has 2 appearances for Boavista on the season, and in his last appearance, he came off at the 17th minute mark with an injury. DeAndre Yedlin makes his return to the roster, but DeAndre Yedlin, whenever he's played for the national team, has just not been much to write home about. And And if we end up in a situation where DeAndre Yedlin is our right back against Mexico, I mean, you can pretty much bet that we're not going to have a lot of possession building out of the back against Mexico. Anthony Robinson makes his return, and he's been absolutely phenomenal in World Cup qualifying as the left back for the U.S. men's national team. He's really solidified that position. I expect him to start both games, go 90 both games. We are going to need his athleticism and his speed and his crossing on that left flank. Backing him up will be the return of Sam Vines. Sam Vines made that big transfer over to Antwerp and then got injured and hasn't really factored in Antwerp in a while, so it's cool to see him back with the national team in a moment where we really need him, because we haven't been getting much from George Bello, though I don't expect to see much Sam Vines in this window. It's cool that he's made a return to the national team. Defensive midfielders, we have Tyler Adams and we have Kellen Acosta. Some people were saying that Kellen Acosta was injured and he wasn't expected to be part of this, but it turns out he's fine. So Kellen Acosta will be the backup central defensive midfielder. Hopefully a player that we don't need to see too much of, because our all-world 22-year-old dynamo of a defensive midfielder, Tyler Adams, will be pretty much leading the team in both games. So I'm hoping Tyler Adams gets the armband in both games. He's a very vocal leader. He's a leader both in the way he plays, the way he comes out. So excited to have Tyler Adams there against Mexico. If you recall, the last time we played Mexico, Tyler Adams came in as a very late sub. So I think having a healthy Tyler Adams on the field paired with that MMA midfield, which we'll talk about later, is going to make really turn the tide for the way that the U.S. is able to play Mexico. I don't know if we're going to be just under siege for 90 minutes like we were in Denver in the Nations League final. Moving on to the attacking midfielders, and we have Gianluca Busio, Sebastian Lletget, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, and Christian Roldan. Now, the big surprise that I talked about was no Luca De La Torre, and it seems like there's just not a lot Luca can do at this point to win over Greg Berhalter. We saw in the last window that both Kellen Acosta and Sebastian Lletget had some really bad games against Panama, and yet they continue to make the roster over Luca. Luca did not get much minutes in the last window. I think he got some cleanup minutes against Jamaica, and that was it. And I don't know what's going on where he can't impress Berhalter over Lletget at this point. It's a bit of a surprise, especially considering you could bring in a bunch of players and he could have just had Luca on the roster, but chose not to. So don't know what's going on there. Now, the good news is we do have Weston McKennie and Yunus Musa. The MMA midfield will be able to return. Weston McKennie has just been playing phenomenally for Juventus, man. And we're seeing, after that last window, there was a lot of criticism of Weston McKennie. A lot of people wanted to drop him. A lot of people said that, he's just an energetic ball winner, and he's sloppy in possession, and he's sloppy in passing and stuff. And maybe some of that stuff is true, but he's also a lot of other things, man. He can also pick up the ball and just drive at the attack and make something happen, like he did again with Juventus this weekend, where he almost scored an absolute wonder goal. He does have goals in him. He seems to be the most threatening goal scorer that Juventus have at the moment. We know about his elite aerial ability in the box and his just acrobatic finishes in the box whenever you put in a ball to him. But he's also has this ability to win the ball back. He's tireless in his running. He does put in some pretty amazing long passes. He's one of our top long passers. It's not something that people give him a lot of credit for, but a couple of times a game, Weston McKennie is going to open up the defense with a nice attack. It's just, it's just cleaning up those moments. There was that moment against Costa Rica where Weston kind of had a walkabout and just turned over possession twice, and it led to that opportunity for Costa Rica where Chris Richards had that slide tackle where it could have been a red card penalty but wasn't. It's just cleaning up those moments from Weston McKennie that's really going to allow him to continue moving forward to be an even better player, because at this moment in time, I mean, he's already a very, very, very good midfielder. And a borderline elite level midfielder, and I think people need to give him that credit. Yunus Musa had a huge window in October, solidifying himself, for me at least, as an undroppable player in the U.S. men's national team. But whenever he headed back to his club, he hasn't gotten the minutes that you would expect him to get. He's had, I believe, one start in the last 5 games and has gotten a few substitute minutes, but he's been unused in a few games too, which is a bit of a concern, especially considering Greg might use that as an excuse to start somebody else, which would be very scary for me. Something to consider. For me, at least if I was the coach, if I was running the world, I wouldn't care about any of that, and I would start that MMA midfield anyway. Now, Gianluca Busio makes his return to the national team. He is everybody's favorite player. He has been just incrementally getting better and better at Venezia. You know, a lot of people expected him to be a 6 whenever he transferred over to Italy, and he started some games at 6, but at this point he's kind of settled in as a left central midfielder, and in that position is able to pick up the ball and kind of survey the field and play his beautiful long balls all over the pitch. And he seems to just be growing in confidence and getting more and more involved in games for Venezia. One of their better players on the field in the attacking sense. Certainly tends to be on at the beginning of whatever good thing happens for Venezia on their offense. So he's becoming more and more of a weapon. I'm not sure he's reached his final form at this point. I think he's still got a lot of room to grow. But it's exciting to see him just grow into that player that we really want him to be, that we really all are hoping to be, that midfield maestro that can just pinpoint balls all over the pitch. And that leaves us with Lletget and Roldan. And this is where, you know, you make the case for John Brooks, where if you're going to drop John Brooks for not being effective and not playing at his highest level, it's really tough to not apply that exact same explanation to Sebastian Lletget and Christian Roldan, especially whenever you have a player out there like Luca De La Torre, who, at worst, is in the conversation. At worst, you can make an argument that he should be in there and should be given an opportunity. That's at the absolute worst. I know there's people that are very high on Luca De La Torre and think that he can be a top contributing player for this national team. But at worst, you have to say he's in the conversation. And for Brooks to get dropped and Lletget not to get dropped, it's a bit confusing. It's tough for me to really explain. And the same goes for Roldan. I guess Roldan can contribute both at the winger position and in the attacking midfield position, but with only 2 games in this window and with the other quality players that can also fill in that role, it's a bit surprising to me. Let's move on to the wingers, where we have Pulisic, Weah, Areola, and Aronson. These are the 4 players that I predicted that would be on the roster, and here they are. Very good to see Christian Pulisic back. It's going to be very interesting to see what he does for Chelsea on Saturday, how many minutes he gets. I think that's going to go a long way to determining how many minutes he's going to get for the national team. Chelsea, of course, has a lot of injuries out there at Christian Pulisic's position, so if he's able to start, I'm assuming he will. If he's able to go 45, I'm assuming they're going to get as much out of Christian as they possibly can this Saturday. So we'll see what happens there. He did get a few minutes in the Champions League against Malmo, and he looked pretty good. He looked his old explosive self. So I'm optimistic. You know, whatever minutes we can get out of Christian Pulisic in this window will be a good thing. If Christian Pulisic is unable to start or unable to contribute a whole lot, we do have 2 really good wingers who are contributing a ton to their club teams right now in Brendan Aronson and Tim Weah. Aronson, one of the hottest Americans out there right now. Seems like he either gets a goal or assist for Salzburg week in, week out. One of those names that is in line for a big transfer at the end of the season. We'll kind of see how that plays out. But Brendan Aronson has absolutely kind of skyrocketed this year for the national team. Tim Weah just getting better and better. Tim Weah likewise has come a long way this year, has become an integral part of Lille's attack, and it is just growing. He's already such a graceful player on the ball and can just pick out spots and find things and set up other players as well as score for himself. But he seems to just be getting more and more consistent and more confident in himself, so I'm excited about that. Paul Areola also on the roster. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that are upset that he's in over Conrad. And to be fair, Areola was carrying an injury from the last qualifier and has not just been like a 90-minute player for DC United. He's kind of been coming back from that injury, so people were wondering if that would have him be left off of this national team. And Conrad, to be fair to Conrad has not been like an every-game 90-minute starter for Marseille. He's had been an unused sub in a couple of games. He actually got a start recently, and he has been contributing, but there's still room for growth for Conrad. Again, this is one of those positions where with a 2-game window and 2 games that are like really big games for the national team, I'm hoping that the majority of the minutes will go to Pulisic, Weah, and Aronson, and we don't really have to worry about Areola. At striker, there was a big surprise, at least for me. Of course, we had Ricardo Pepi, the striker for FC Dallas, who has just taken the national team by storm and is really kind of taking world soccer by storm. It seems like every club in world soccer is connected to Pepi. I saw the recent big rumors, Man United's connected to Pepi, and just like everybody wants Ricardo Pepi right now, so we're really hoping that he ends up in a club situation that's going to be really good for him, that he gets playing time and continues to develop. The question was always going to be who was that second striker. I thought Giassi Zardes was going to be able to return from his injury in time for this, but it appears that's not the case. So with no Giassi Zardes, there was a handful of strikers out there who could possibly be on the list. I did not really include Jesus Ferreira on that list. I thought Jesus Ferreira would be more in line for the winger position because he's like a second striker and played as a false nine, and Greg hasn't really had him in camp for a while. But Jesus Ferreira has been playing really, really well for FC Dallas. A player that's been really good at finding the holes and finding the gaps and creating for the players around him, like Ricardo Pepi. So I'm definitely on the Jesus Ferreira train as well as the Pepi train. I just did not expect it to be this soon. I thought that Ferreira would be one for maybe the January camp and beyond, or I guess the December camp now. It's not the January camp anymore, but I thought that Ferreira might be able to work his way in that way. But to see him now, it is a bit of a surprise, and it also goes to show where Greg thinks that Sargent is right now and where he thinks DK is right now, and where he values PFOC. So a little glimpse into what Greg Berhalter views as the striker depth chart at the moment. So some big surprises on this roster, some really big surprises, and I think that leaving off John Brooks is kind of wild, and I think that's something that's going to have some reverberations that we continue to hear from, and might be a pivotal moment for this team moving forward, either positively or negatively, depending on how this window goes. We said before, this is a massive window where we don't necessarily have to win these games in order to qualify for the World Cup, but if we want to have a comfortable, smooth World Cup qualification, we really need to get points from these games. So it's really important that we win this game and come out strong. And we do have a really strong 11 that we can put on this field that can definitely play with Mexico and definitely win this game. And we've seen that the U.S. won against Mexico with an even weaker lineup in the Nations League, and a much weaker lineup in the Gold Cup. So it's not like Mexico's this unbeatable team, though they do have Raul Jimenez has returned to that squad, and he's going to be a big boon for them. So some big surprises from Greg Berhalter with this 25. I cannot wait for this Mexico game. I think it's just going to be a huge pivotal moment, at least in the history of this new generation of U.S. men's national team. Just a big moment. So many interesting storylines with the young players and with, Ricardo Pepi, and just so much going on. It's going to be absolutely massive. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section. What do you think about the snubs? What do you think that this team is going to be able to do? As always, si puede hablar español, dígame un comentario en español para que puedo practicar mi español. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet. Hit the like button. It helps out tremendously. If you want to become a member, hit the join button. You get access to badges and behind the scenes stuff and extra content. Thank you to Manuel Oliveres for becoming a Tier 2 member. That is so cool. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.